Good morning. This is Jeannie Kitchens with the Credential Engine team. Thanks to all of you for taking the time this morning to join us. We really do appreciate it. For those of you who are just arriving in the webinar, I want to be sure that you can hear me. Nobody is muted at this time. Scarlett will only mute if we start to get background noise, because we will record this webinar and make it available to those who could not make the session or the repeat session this afternoon. So go ahead and put your full name and organization into the pod directly adjacent to the chat. And then to the right of it, if you could go ahead and answer the 3 questions, it just helps us where we need to focus some attention today. So we'll give everyone just a moment to do that. And then I'm going to go ahead and ask Scarlett to go ahead, once it looks like the polling has stopped, to go ahead and end those polls by clicking the little end button and move them off to the side. And I'll go ahead and pull the presentation over. Fantastic. And also, the video camera should be enabled, so if anybody would like to turn their cameras on, you can go ahead and do so as well. And I want to make sure everyone can see the PowerPoint. I've got a PowerPoint slide just below the camera pod there. If you would like it to increase the size of the PowerPoint, what you can do is in the top right hand corner of the pod where you see it, you could make it full screen, and then when you want to, you can change it back to fit back into the little space where you see it now. So let me go over the topics that the Credential Engine team is going to talk about today. The welcome and housekeeping, I pretty much just covered those kinds of things. If you have any problems with your audio and you need to switch, say, from your microphone to the telephone, put a note in the chat. We'll be keeping an eye on that, and we'll go ahead and put the phone number in there. As I said, nobody is muted. Unless we get background noise, then Scarlett and David will mute people just because it's being recorded and we don't want it to be distracting. We're going to provide a quick technical briefing. We're going to do a WorkIt search app demo. Based on the poll, it looks like the participants are kind of split down the middle as to how familiar they are with it, and several updates have been made. As you all know, the project is still very much in a testing phase, and so a lot of things are changing all the time. So even for those who are familiar, when Nate gives a demo, it may help just provide an update on some of the new things happening with the search app. And then David and Scarlett are going to talk about some guides and checklists that have been sent to all of the registry participants as a way to review your information. And then we're going to do an introduction to the CTD L Editor and, of course, cover Q&A and next steps. Now, please, throughout the webinar, anytime you have any questions or comments, you can put them in the chat. You could ask us to pause, verbally. So, please feel free to go ahead and ask those questions or make comments.
Anywhere but you.
So just really, just a quick update on the current registry participants. We've got 101 partner organizations who are registry participants, meaning they've selected 1 or more credentials to continue to include with this testing phase. There are 5 quality assurance organizations that are partners. And we also have a statewide partner. It's the state of Indiana, and we'll be partnering with a couple of other states as well And so even though the state of Indiana includes multiple universities, right now we're considering that one partner, although if you count the various state agencies and secondary and post-secondary institutions, it definitely increases the number of organizations beyond one. And you can see that on the pie chart on the right, we're still tracking the various types of credentials that are being included. You know, the goal is still to have all credential types, in particular in this testing phase, so we can make sure that the technologies work for all types of credentials. So you can see that the largest number is still certificates. And I would add to that that those are mostly certificates offered by post-secondary, so they're less than a degree, but they require enrollment in post-secondary programs. And you can see we have a large number of bachelor's degrees, and we have a large number of certifications, as well as associate degrees, badges, master's degrees, and other types of credentials. So just wanted to give everyone a quick update on what that's looking like. So just a real quick technical briefing. The Technical Advisory Committee continues to meet every month. We meet the last Friday of the month. We may have some Technical Advisory Committee members on this webinar. And if anyone on the webinar is interested in joining, we still welcome new members. This particular advisory group is not through a nomination process, so it's always open. We share a lot of information, and it's important to have both program experts or content experts as well as technical experts. We've got a lot going on with the Technical Advisory Committee right now, but what I wanted you to know is our next meeting is the last Friday in June, and one of the big projects with that group is we're doing a credentialing ecosystem mapping project with standards bodies across the United States. For our registry participants, the partners have all been sent the guides that Scarlett and David are going to cover in just a moment. And so we're asking all of our registry participants to really start looking at the WorkIt app and really start looking at your information and asking us questions about it so we can make sure that the information is on the right track. We're also continuing to work with that subset of partners. Right now it's 8 partners on the development of the roadmap guidance co-design, and that will be of course available to all of you, to all partners, but we wanted to work with a subset of partners to actually implement the technologies that will then go to scale as we go live. And we're also working on developing vendor strategies. And I wanted to mention this because certainly one of the ways to ensure that when we go live, that any credentialing organization can get their credentials out on the web as linked data and in the registry. One of the ways to do that will be if some of the most used vendor products are changed to easily output that information. So we're working on developing some vendor strategies with the roadmap guide group, and also we'll of course be talking to our technical advisory committee, and we'll want to come back to you and share that information as well and get your feedback on that. So the credential transparency description language has been available since April. The next release is June 30th. And on our credential registry services, the testing on that, has continued, and we'll be sending out a survey to all advisory group members next week concerning minimum expected data requirements for the registry. We've been working on the incoming and outgoing APIs, pushing and pulling data options, authentication and accounts. There's just a lot going on here. Too much to list, but wanted you to know that the work continues and it's all going quite well. Now, I also want to start talking about competency framework, registry, and tools. And when we talk about competency frameworks, we're also talking about learning outcomes, learning standards. So frameworks or sets of statements that described, things like knowledge, skills, and abilities that we can then align to credentials and the related learning opportunities and assessments. So we're working on storing the framework statements, tools to browse and download them, and tools to convert, for example, PDF or Word documents into the machine readable formats, much like how the CTDL works. So we'll start talking more about that as well. The WorkIt Search App Prototype, Nate Argo, who's on the webinar, is going to demo that during our time together this morning. And we're continuing to improve and gather feedback on the Search App Prototype. And we'll start getting into the CTD L Editor, which, as you know, is the short-term way for how your information is being is pushed into the registry. So let me know if there is any questions on the technical briefing. Let me just take a quick look and see if there's any comments over here I should respond to. I see a little note from Callie Morrison, has a competency framework group work with the NACE and their competencies. No, I don't think we've worked specifically with the NACE, Callie. Well, I had mentioned that there's a credentialing ecosystem mapping group. The first kind of order of business with that mapping group are competency frameworks, more from a technical standpoint. And so the purpose of that mapping is to ensure that the US standards that are used predominantly for, say, vendor products, that we're all aligning and mapping competency frameworks and the technical aspects of that. But any other kind of competency frameworks themselves, all types can be in the competency registry, and maybe I'll follow up with you on that. I want everyone to know that the plan is to go live in 2017, and what that means is we'll continue to have this testing environment because we'll always need it, but in addition to the testing environment, we'll have the live or production environment where it's for real data, so these services will be available to get credentials in, to get competency frameworks in, to get all of that information out as well. And so we just want to reinforce that that's happening this year. And of course, we're going to be, strongly encouraging all of the registry participants to, as the registry goes live, move their credentials to that live environment and go beyond just the small test quantity. So more on that will be coming. And here I'm going to turn it over to Nate to do a quick demo of the WorkIt app. This PowerPoint will be, hey Nate, just hold on 1 second though, and then you see this little share pod off to the right that you can go ahead and queue up now, and then we'll pull it over in a second. So you can go ahead, yeah. This PowerPoint is going to be emailed to all registry participant partners. So right after the webinar, you'll receive it in your email. And so before Nate pulls his screen share over, we just want to make sure that all of you have the instructions to log in. We have given passwords to all registry participant teams If anybody thinks they should have a password but doesn't have one, let us know. You could put it in the chat and Scarlett will follow up. But everyone should have a password. And there's a couple slides here that let you know how to log in. And so I'm just going to very quickly go over that so Nate can go ahead and cover the demo. So from the Credential Finder URL in the top right-hand corner, you see the login. And this is still a private site, and so only people who have a password will see credential information. So currently you have to log in. You'll see this little red message. If you've been given a password, you will be able to see all of the credentials that have been entered so far in various states. And then we're going to want to make sure that you can find your credentials. So we're going to cover this after Nate does his demo. So let me go ahead and move this off of the screen. And then Nate, why don't you go ahead and pull over here.
All right.
There we go.
Okay. Can everyone hear me all right and see the screen and everything?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. All right, so this here is the WorkIt App Prototype. This is intended to kind of show off CTDL and what it can do. Now, I want to first mention that this app is intended more for the partners, more for you guys, than it is for end users. We wanted to try to make it sort of look like a site that might be found out in the wild, that might be intended for people who are actually looking for credentials and for the related information there. But really, the information in this site is very verbose, because what we wanted to do was show off all of the classes and properties that are in CTDL. And I'll go ahead and link this site in the chat. This site, if you haven't seen it before, is the technical site for the schema that we're working with, the CTDL. So whenever we develop it, and whenever we add things to it, change it, and whatever, all that information shows up here. And you can see that the schema has quite a bit to it. So the WorkIt app, some of the information in there is very verbose, and we just didn't want to overwhelm normal users with that. So what we're trying to foster here is a marketplace where developers can take the information that you might find, or a subset of the information, I should say, that you might find in this app, and create, their own websites, their own mobile apps, their own whatever things for end users that maybe focus on specific parts of the information available in CTDL, like maybe just credentials or just assessments or stuff that's only relevant to a certain state, that kind of thing. So anyway, getting back to the app here. So we have our home page, which just sort of introduces, what this app is for, what credentials, what we mean when we say credential, because that means different things to different people. What we mean when we say quality assurance, because again, that means different things to different people. And in our context, quality assurance usually comes down to one organization providing, say, approval or accreditation or something of that nature, either to another organization or to a credential, possibly other things as well. But in general, that's what we mean when we say quality assurance. We have a video here that kind of goes into more detail to introduce all of that. I'll let you guys watch that on your own. And then down here, we have just kind of an overview of the sort of audiences that this information would be useful for. So you got job seekers, young adults, students, employers, education, and government. So again, there's a lot of information for a lot of different kinds of folks, and we hope that people will take the parts of this that they're interested in and produce websites and apps and whatever else that is relevant to their sort of target market or their target audiences. And again, to kind of show you some of the depths of the information that we've got currently, this is our aggregate data page. There's the link to this in the footer. And here you just see sort of an overview of all the information that we have currently in the WorkIt app. So you see we've got quite a few organizations and credentials. We also have assessments and learning opportunities. And real quick, assessments are sort of a blanket term for anything that tests a skill. So it could be literally a written test. It could be like a driving exam. It could be a welding examination. It could be anything that assesses something, basically. And then learning opportunities is a really broad category that covers anything from, a simple one-day class in something to a full degree program or maybe some kind of a training program. Essentially, a learning opportunity is anything that involves education. So we have these four I guess we call them top-level entities in the system: organizations, credentials, assessments, and learning opportunities. And so that's what this page sort of gives you an overview of as far as what we have in the system. All right, so next I'm going to go to the search, but before I do that, are there any questions so far? Okay. So we'll go over to our search page here. So the search page would work not exactly like Google because we've got some extra filtering and things that we'll go into in a minute. But the idea here is to give you a real quick summary of what information we have for each one of these items here. So here we've got a search for credentials. We can also search for organizations, assessments, and learning opportunities. But we'll stick to credentials for the moment. So in each one of the results, there's a few important things. There's obviously an icon that represents the type of credential. We've got, I think, 20, 30-odd different types. There's obviously the title. There's a link to the detail page for the owner of that credential. There's a quick summary of it. And then down here we have these sort of gray boxes at the bottom of these search results. And what these show are additional information that we have for that credential. So we see that this first one here receives these 3 different quality assurances from various organizations. We see that it's intended for these 4 education levels. We see that it covers 19 different subjects. And the way that we have subjects are sort of like keywords, but they're more focused specifically to something that credential covers. We do have a separate keywords field that is intended just for, search keywords, things you might type in to find that credential. Subjects look more or less the same, but they're intended more to be, again, the things covered by that credential. We also see that this credential covers 62 different competencies. Now, we don't show all of them here. We have a link to show more here, and then we'll get to the detail page shortly. But you see that it just has a title and a description for these competencies, and an indicator that there's more of them. Now, as we scroll down the page, you'll notice that a lot of these are from Indiana. So one of our partners, Indiana, has been entering a lot of credentials lately. They've been very busy, and we really appreciate the work that they've been putting into it. But all of them are from Ivy Tech, which is the community college system in Indiana. And some of them have more information than others, but you'll see that we also have other stuff. So we'll go back up to the top here, because another thing I want to cover, and how are we doing on time, Jeannie? Let me get a sense of timing here. Okay. So real quick, there's 2 things I want to cover more. So there's the filters and there's the map. So the map view is intended to give you a much bigger picture, a visual representation of where you're going to find these credentials. So you see the first, I think, 25 results that we load by default all are right now in Indiana. So if I was to zoom in here, you see that they're all in that location. If I move this window to a separate location and hit search area, it'll search for any credential that can be acquired by going to that place. So if I zoom into Indiana and hit search again, we'll get some more results here as I scroll down and load more in. You can see they popped in. And that'll just continue until we've run out of results for that search. You can also type in the name of a place here to focus the map on that place. And again, you hit search area, it'll look for any results that would be applicable to that place. And we'll go into where that information comes from when we get to the detail page. The other thing I want to cover are the filters. Now we've got a whole bunch of different categories of filters here, and essentially 3 different types of filters. So first we have the binary checkbox type filters. So we have credential types, which is essentially just you pick the type of credential. And what you see here are not all of the credentials that we have in CTDL. What shows here are only the types of credentials that we have some kind of data for currently. So if we had one for every single type, this list would be even longer. And the same idea for audience level types. Again, it's just a list of checkboxes essentially. We have credential connections, and what these are when one credential has some kind of relation to another, which are covered by the names of these. So you have, one credential or one assessment or one learning opportunity, one whatever, may provide, say, advanced standing for one. It may provide preparation for it. It may be is required for one, that kind of thing. We have competencies and subject areas. Now these have a slightly different interface for entering them. You basically just type in whatever it is you're looking for and hit enter. And that does a special type of keyword search that focuses only on that particular field within the data. We also have the industries and occupations filters. And again, this is the sort of third type of filtering that we have. For our purposes right now, the industries come from the NAICS codes, and the occupations come from the SOC codes. We are looking at expanding that to cover, say, like the military occupation codes and some other things. And of course, this, in terms of CTDL, could also cover, say, like the European, I think it's ESCO codes, and other stuff like that. So the way that these work is you pick the top level that you're interested in, sort of the category of it. You'll see additional things for that category, and as you select those, you'll get results that apply to those. Go ahead and reset that. And then going back to the competencies one, so again, you just type something that you're looking for here, and we have 446 credentials in the system right now, so it's maybe not absolutely anything you're looking for, but I type in programming, hit enter, then they'll do a search for that. And so you see we've got a few different credentials that are related to programming. And so if you're a consumer and you're looking at this, one of the other features we wanted to enable was to let you compare these. Now, obviously, you could just look at them in the search results, but if you want to compare them in more detail, we have these buttons over here. So let's say I wanted to compare these three. Now, the first thing you'll see is that it flashes down here at the bottom. So you can hit toggle details, and you'll see that you've selected 3 credentials to compare. You could also compare organizations, assessments, and learning opportunities. That all works the same way. You can remove them with the X button here. You can clear all of them by hitting this icon up here. You can collapse this list back again. But let's say we want to go over to our compare page. So hit compare selected, and that'll bring us to another page that is essentially fetching the data for each one of those and setting it up side by side here so that we can take a look. And so we see, obviously the name of the credential, the owner, and again, these are links to the detail pages for those. We'll get to those shortly. We have the descriptions for them, and I can also expand these areas if I'm interested in the information that they cover. So we have the credential type, the audience level, the industries and occupations, the estimated cost for these, and the estimated time to earn them. And so I'm just going to pick this one here, because let's say I'm mostly interested in this one. And this brings us to the detail page. And before I go into this, I'm going to pause again. So are there any questions so far? Okay. So the detail page, again, is where we have all the information on display that we have for that credential. Now, again, remember I mentioned earlier that there's quite a bit of stuff in CTDL. So an end-user application probably would not need to show all of this, and there's even more here in the right column. We'll get to that eventually. They would only focus on the subsets that they're interested in. But the purpose of this site, again, for the sake of our partners and to show off CTDL, we want to really fully populate this page. So we have 3 columns, basically 3 zones, if you want to call them that. We have the basic information, the location information, and everything else. So on the left, we have the basic information, which is stuff like the link to the credentials website or page on some host website, that kind of thing. We have the description of it. We have an indication of how long it will take to earn. And then we have all of the sort of filtering information here, so credential type, the audience level, subjects, occupations, industries, and so on. And any sort of additional miscellaneous stuff goes down here in the additional information section here. The location information column has a couple of things to it. If the credential is available online, you'll see a link to it here. If there's also a physical location where you can go to earn it, you'll see a map to that here. And you'll see the address to it here. You'll see the jurisdiction that it covers. Now, the jurisdiction is a little different from the location because the jurisdiction for a credential is where that credential is applicable. So you see this one's can be used anywhere in the United States. But say if you had a credential that was only valid in a certain state or maybe a certain city, you would see a jurisdiction of that state or of that city. And that may not always be where you go to actually earn that credential, but it's where you can use it. That's the difference between the location and the jurisdiction. We also see that this credential is owned by, in this case, Brandman University, and there's a quick little summary of who and what they are here. And that's the location zone. So we also have more information. Now the bulk of the info for essentially anything on the detail page goes over here because the way that the CTDL is structured is that we have this sort of concept we call profiles. And what profiles are groupings of information. So if you have, say, the costs for something, and those costs are only relevant to a certain audience or under certain circumstances, then it's not enough to just give a price for a credential. You also have to give, the price for this audience in this place, that kind of thing. In order to group that together, we use these things called profiles, which are just classes within CTDL. And the way that those end up looking, we group those together and put them over here. So first, we see that this credential teaches 39 competencies, which means if you go into the program to earn this, you're going to learn all of these here. We also see that this credential includes 13 other credentials. So in the process of earning this credential, you're also going to earn all of these credentials here. We see this credential receives quality assurance, in this case through its owner. So in this case, Brandman University has this accreditation from WASC. So by inference, you say that, this credential is also accredited because it comes from Brandman. We see that this credential requires this learning opportunity with these additional sort of conditions applied to it. And again, this learning opportunity has its own detail page with a quick sort of summary of what it is here. And we see under other requirements the additional things you have to do to earn this credential. So you have to take not only the learning opportunity, but you have to satisfy these requirements as well. And there's something interesting about these requirements that we'll get into shortly, but just keep that in mind for the moment. We also have the cost for this credential. So again, this is the learning opportunity estimated cost. And you may be wondering, why are we seeing the stuff about the learning opportunity on the credentials detail page? That's because the way that we have the app set up is that information, say, on a credential, information that is relevant to it but comes from somewhere else can be bubbled up or floated up, or however you want to phrase it, displayed on the credentials detail page. And the way that works is this information, in this case this cost information, actually exists within the records for the learning opportunity. But because this credential requires that learning opportunity, we want to be able to show the cost for that learning opportunity when you're looking at the credential so that you don't have to go and explore every possible entity that's related to that credential just to get all of the information about it. So that's why that's here. And then, of course, we also have the registry info. So if you're more technically inclined, you're more curious about, what are the nuts and bolts of how this actually operates, the credential registry, we have these identifiers in it. So there's the CTID, which is covered in more detail in the technical site. But essentially, the CTID is a unique identifier for that credential. And the way that you would use that is you would give that CTID to the registry through one of their APIs or through one of their interfaces, and it would give you back this metadata here. Now, this is JSON LD, if you're familiar with that. If not, you shouldn't need to be, because it's the job of people who are to build systems that can bring this information to you in a more user-friendly format like this. But basically, all of this here is the raw machine-readable information for this credential as it would appear in the credential registry. Okay. So now I'm going to hold off for a moment and say, are there any questions? Well, we got a few, I think. Would our credentials have come with the handouts you sent? I think Scarlett answered that one. Okay, so Scarlett, it looks like you've been covering these. Do you need any further detail on that?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. All right, so we see that this credential is owned by Brandman University. So if I go to this detail page, this is what we have for Brandman University. So you see it looks a lot like the credentials detail page. That's because there's a lot of commonality in the information that we have for credentials, for organizations, for assessments, and for learning opportunities. They all have, a name, a description. They all have a jurisdiction. They all have, information like that. And some of the profiles are shared between them too. So we were able to take advantage of that and build a detail page out of mostly the same parts. So they look similar. We see this information about Brandman University here. So again, same idea. You've got the basic info on the left. You see the URL to the organization, description of it. You see the sort of search filter type information about it here. You see some miscellaneous info for it here. In the center column, again, you've got the locations, and I want to highlight that these are all addresses where they have locations. For organizations, in the contact info section, we have things like the phone numbers, we have email addresses, we have their social media through these icons here. And again, we have the jurisdiction, which basically says that Brandman operates in the United States. And we see that they own the one credential that we were looking at before. Now, obviously, they own others, but this is what we have in the system. And they have 4 condition manifests, which I'll go into in a moment. We see that they receive this quality assurance here, that they perform this quality assurance here. We'll see again that they have this registry information, which looks, again, a lot like the previous detail pages information. So this is the raw data as it would appear in the credential registry for Brandman University. Now the condition manifest, remember I said on the previous detail page that there is something interesting about those requirements? That's because the requirements for this credential under the other requirements section actually come from the condition manifests for Brandman University. So the way that this works is that for conditions, say Brandman University has a whole bunch of different degrees that they offer. Now those degrees have a common set of things you have to do, which are detailed here, in order to get their degrees. So rather than have Brandman duplicate that information and publish it within the record for each one of those credentials, instead what they do is they publish these things called condition manifests, which are essentially just lists of condition profiles, which are covered in the CTDL technical site. So you can get more detail about those there. But the short version is that a condition profile is just a list of all of the things you have to do in order to earn something, in this case a credential. So the condition manifest is a list of condition profiles. And what Brandman University does is they publish these manifests sort of as standalone entities that any of their credentials can then reference, so that if one of those condition manifests gets updated, they don't have to go and republish the information for each one of their credentials. Those credentials reference that manifest, and that manifest is what is retrieved by a system that would be consuming this data. So whenever that manifest gets updated, then essentially all of those credentials get updated too. So what we have here is the same information being displayed not only in the condition manifest window here, but also in the requirements section here, because again, the WorkIt app is going and reading that condition manifest data and pulling it into the credentials detail page. So that's sort of one of the more interesting things that we've done recently with CTDL and with WorkIt. And we're also going to take the same approach in the coming weeks for the cost profile. And the costs will work the same way. So if the Brandman University has a set of common costs that apply to all of its degrees, again, they just publish a cost manifest that their degrees would then point to. And obviously, those credentials are going to have conditions or costs or whatever that are sort of over and above those common requirements, and that's fine. That data would be published with that credential just like anything else. Okay, so do we have any other questions on any of this? Okay, so Jean, unless there's anything else you wanted me to cover on this, I will go ahead and turn it back over to you. Let's go get someone typing. Nope, okay. Did we lose Jeannie's audio? Oh,
Go ahead, Nate, and close that share pod, and actually Scarlett and David can move on to the next section.
all right.
All right.
Oh, what happened? Hello, everyone. This is Scarlett Van Stuckelman with the Credential Engine team. And all partners within the last week or so should have received personalized instructions that were created to help you navigate through your information in the WorkIt Prototype application. The review guides, you'll have one separate for your credentials, your organizations, your assessments, and your learning opportunities. And then we also provided direct links with those instructions that we sent to you. And if you, like Jeannie mentioned earlier, if you did not receive these instructions, please let me know and I'll get them sent to you right away. And then after we talk about the review guides, we're going to move into talking about the CTD L Editor and then your next steps. One of the first personalized instructions you received were for the organization detail page. These instructions are going to provide your URL directly to your detail page. So you can go in there and look over the 3 separate zones to see if your information is correct. And then we also, from the organization detail page, you can go directly to your credentials, so it's kind of full circle of you verifying your information. All of the instructions are going to have your links and your credentials listed out, and a checklist so you can check things off to make sure that the information is there, if you're missing anything. And then it's also going to provide you with information on what things mean, like the gray boxes and the search and the definitions that are with the CTDL. That's also going to help you understand the information better so you know if the information is correct or if we're missing anything. And then you'll also have the tutorial to go through your assessments. And like Nate said earlier, a lot of the detail pages pretty much do all look alike. They'll have the 3 zones. But again, these instructions are going to help you navigate easier through and know the definitions better. And then so we have the learning opportunity too. So depending on your organization and your credential that you provided, you will for sure have received a instruction for your organization and your credential. And depending on the credential you provided, you would have received the instructions for a learning opportunity or the instructions for an assessment, and or even both depending on your credential. Before we move on, are there any questions about the instructions or if someone did not receive them? Okay, we'll move on. Paul, the instructions were sent out last week. I can ensure that I did get those sent to you and resend them if needed right after this webinar. Next, we have the introduction to the CTD L Editor. From the polling questions, it looked like not a lot of registry participants have gone into the editor to edit any of their information. With your login and your role access on the WorkIt Prototype website, you will go to your credential, your organization, your learning opportunity, your assessment. You're always going to see this edit button in the top right corner from that detail page. You will select edit on any of those, and it'll take you to the editor page with the panels that will expand for you to enter in your information. This is an example of the organization editor for Brandman University. You can see that there's the separate panels. When they have, the panels are green, that means that there's information added in there, and if they're the light blue grayish color, then that means there is no information available or has been entered for that yet. And you always want to make sure if you are adding anything or removing anything that you save your data, and then you can also preview your detail page from there after you've made your changes. And then next you'll see that this is the editor for the credential. It looks a lot like the organization editor, except we have more panels since we're wanting more information for the credentials. And again, if you're adding any information, removing any information, you want to make sure to save the data, and you, again, can preview your detail page right from the editor. And the same for an assessment. The panels are all going to look alike. There just might be a few different things that we're wanting to know a little different information about for the assessment specifically. And again, adding or changing in information, saving the data, and you can always preview. And then finally, we have the Learning Opportunity Editor. You'll see it has the panels, and if they're green, there's information in there. The blue-gray, there's not. You can have your managing organization from any of these, all of your requirements, everything can be added with the editor. And then once again, you want to just make sure you save that data. So you can ensure that it was entered correctly and then previewing it to see how it looks on your detail page. For the next steps for the partners, we want you to log into the Credential Finder website with your login information. If you do not have your login information, please feel free to send me an email, and I will ensure that you have your login information and can see your credentials in your organization. We want you guys to use your guides and checklists that we created for you to review your information, and we would love to hear all of your feedback on your information about the organizations, the credentials, the assessments, and the learning opportunities. And if you ever want to just send an email, get on a quick call, a quick webinar to go over your information, we can set that up right away and help you out as fast as we can. And then we've also provided my email and then also Emily Raphael's email. She is on the call as well. If you can provide any feedback, edited information to us, and we can work with you to making sure it's correct. Then, like we said, the credential team will work with you to ensure your information is correct. And then we are currently working on instructions for partners to use the CTDL editor. These instructions will be emailed to all registry participants once these have been completed, and we'll schedule the next all-partner webinar to be more focused on the CTDL editor and those instructions we provided to you in July, so then you, the partners, can get in there and feel comfortable editing your information and making sure it's all correct. And then are there any questions?
Thank you, Scarlett. There were a couple of questions. By when would you like to complete these next steps? Thanks for asking that, Michelle. Ideally, if all of the registry participant partners could use those instruction sheets and review the credential information so we can make any changes and pretty much be able to say that overall the credential information that's being shown in the app is correct. By the next meeting in July, that would be ideal. So, we don't have a hard, fast deadline for it, but we would like to be able to have as much of the information as correct as possible by the next registry participant meeting that will be held in July. And do we have the ability to add addition? Yeah, you do. So the editor that you saw in the slide, and that each of you that have credentials in the registry and showing in this app, you will see an edit button with your credential information, and you'll also see an add button at the very top of the screen. So you can add additional. And I just want to point out, and just to make sure everybody, again, I just like to repeat this, that the editor is a short-term approach for modeling and testing all this data, for seeing what it looks like in the registry and so forth. It will likely have a long-term role for very small organizations that may have, one or two stable credentials. So I don't want, in particular, universities or colleges that have large quantities to think that this is going to be about manually entering credentials. But we do want to make sure that the credentials that you've selected thus far are correct, and you can go ahead and add another or two or three, whatever you would like to do. With your login, you should be able to go ahead and do that. So you're welcome to do that. And we don't have a date for July. Of course, we have the holiday coming up in July, so probably around this time or maybe the following week of wherever July 4th sounds, just so we can make sure people can participate. So we'll let you know as soon as possible, as soon as we can get that date on calendars, and we'll schedule it, excuse me, similar to how we formatted today's, to have a morning and afternoon session, repeat session, so you could attend whatever session works best for you. And any other questions? Illinois Department of Public Health is in your system and in another state agency in the registry. Yeah, it is run. That's a case where the program, a certified nurse aid testing program, to earn the occupational license, a type of credential, is managed through Department of Public Health or regulated through Department of Public Health. Okay, well, I think if we've answered all the questions, we've got a couple of minutes left. If anybody has any other questions they'd like to ask via audio, feel free. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and close out the webinar. Okay. All right. Well, thank you again, everyone. Have a wonderful day, and we look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you, everyone.